Hey everyone, this is Lucid. I'm going to be doing a Let's Play series for the game Dominion 4. It's a multiplayer game with 9 people in it called Garden of Good and Evil, and in it I'm playing the nation MA-Ermor, which is an extremely strong nation. It's normally banned, but I wanted to play them because they're really fun in a multiplayer game, so I hosted the game and announced that I would be picking MA-Ermor at the very beginning, so everyone has picked counters. And it was pretty well understood that they would all be teaming up against me in the pre-game chat, which is kind of what happens every time you pick MA-Ermor, as it should happen. So, it's been a really interesting game. I have already recorded the Pretender design and nation overview pretty close to when I first started the game. However, the audio and video on it wasn't great, and that's because I didn't really have a great understanding of how to use the audio and video software. So I've since improved my understanding, and I wanted to come back and do this first episode again. So at this point in the game, I'm on about turn 90, so this is a game that went extremely deep into the late game, and the game is not nearly over yet. It's not clear who's going to win. However, after this episode, hopping into the next ones, those will be episodes that I recorded a long time ago and are mostly tracking with the game. So I hope you enjoyed it. In this episode, first I'm going to go through the mods that were active in the game. The first one is Lucid's Thematic Gem Gen, which is a mod that I made that creates more of the temporary gem generation items like Fire in a Bottle or Clam of Pearls. It's pretty well balanced. If anything, the items in it are underpowered, so it doesn't affect the balance of the game. And they're pretty cool, I think, and kind of thematic. They're not all the same. It's not like each path has the same item that costs the same amount of gems. They're varied and have other slight buffs on them to make them kind of consistent with the whole Dominions feel. Next is Well-Behaved Wizard mod, which is a mod that slightly improves the spellcasting AI of wizards once they go off script. And it does that by preventing them from casting certain spells. This isn't necessary, but I like to have it on. It was more important in Dominions 3 than in Dominions 4. The next mod is Worthy Heroes, and this is a pretty ubiquitous mod. It's on almost every multiplayer game, and it adds more cool heroes, national unique heroes, to most all nations in the game. So it's a really great mod, and I highly recommend you putting it on. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and read you the national overview for MA-Ermor. So this is the national overview. So it's a race of undead units. You have 3 tiers of units. You have Chaff Undead, which you recruit from provinces. You have Legionnaires, which come from forts. And then you have Sacred units, and there's a few different ways to get it. You have Free Spawn Sacred, Knights that come from forts, especially from forts with temples. You have Lictors, which need to be summoned by a mage or a priest. And you have Wailing Ladies, which can only be summoned by a mage. Your mages are mostly death, though you have some access to fire. You can get up to fire 2. Death you can get up to death 4. And then all the other paths, astral, fire, air, water, and earth. Well, I already mentioned fire you get 2, but all the other ones you get up to 1. So very basic magic access, right? You can get very powerful priests. You have a Holy 1, a Holy 2, and a Holy 3 priest that you can get, and those are very important. And finally, and most importantly, your Dominion kills population. And not slowly, it kills it very quickly. So anywhere your Dominion is, very shortly thereafter, you will not have any income. So it's a kind of torch the earth nation. And this is one of the reasons they get ganged up on, is because people don't want them expanding and killing all the population, across the map. So they kind of often people want to kill them, if for no other reason than just to prevent the pop kill. However, I would suggest there is a much stronger reason to kill them, which is they're extremely overpowered. However, as we will see in this game if you continue watching the series, being overpowered, there is a form of balance that counteracts it, which is other nations will team up against you. And indeed, that is what will happen. So, here we go. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about all the individual units. I'm going to do that by loading a game that I've got. Ermor test. So, here we go. We're going to talk about the units. So, first, you have your chaff, your crappy units, which you can get as free spawn from any province that has your dominion in it. It does not need to have a fort. What you will find is you'll get a lot of these soulless, right? Which are undisciplined. They're basically crap. You'll get these long dead. And then you get these ghouls. Now, these each have a use. Your long dead are okay. They're good. You put these on the front line. They're great to soak up some banishment as they run into battle. Your soulless, these are actually better at soaking up banishment than your long dead. They have worse magic resistance, but they have a lot more hit points. So usually they can take a bit more punishment from banishment than your long dead. So sometimes you'll want to put these out in front of your army as just banishment catchers. What they also serve a good job of is patrolling, because they're really bad in combat. So if you put them in combat, they usually are just going to die very quickly, even against independence. So sometimes you can just keep these on your forts and use them for patrolling. They do not do a good job holding up fort walls. Ghouls are actually the best unit you have for holding up fort walls. So important provinces where you have forts, you'll want ghouls behind them to keep them from falling quickly to an enemy siege. So that is your basic chaff unit. This is kind of like your tier 1 crappy units. The ghouls are very important to my particular strategy. Your tier 2 units are these legionnaires, right? And there's 4 varieties of them. 3 of them, these 2, and then this variety, they all carry javelins. And you want to make sure you don't mix the javelin throwing units with other units, because if you mix a javelin throwing unit like this with a unit like this, which doesn't have a javelin, then this squad will not use its javelin. So you want to make sure you put the javelineers in their own squads. So you have 3 tiers. So you have 4 different types and 3 different types of the javelin throwers. So this is your worst type, right? They have, and it's not very bad actually, right? You have a good helmet and you have a tower shield. So these guys are very effective against the archers. But they do get chewed up pretty quickly in melee. But they do have a javelin, so that javelin in and of itself is useful. This is your next tier. They're protection 10, but otherwise very similar in that. They're protection 10 because they have a rusty ringmail hauberk. So these are very good. These are extremely good at expanding against independence. They're just a great unit. And then this is the 3rd javelin thrower. They have rusty scalemail hauberk, which is a slightly better armor. It's protection 11 instead of 8. So your net protection is 12. And they have a very good tower shield. And they have a javelin. These guys are super solid. They're princeps. Yep. And then you have these guys, the Triarius, which are, they have long spears, so it's a 5-link weapon, which means you're going to be getting a lot of repels, right? It's a very long weapon. They're pierce resistant. They have 16 protection net, and that's because they have a rusty plate hauberk, which is indeed an even better piece of armor, and they also have the same awesome helmet and tower shield. So these guys are extremely good against independence. A few of these actually can just defend for very long periods of time all by themselves. All of these units are size 2, so you can pack 3 in a cell. In one cell with 3 of these, you'll be surprised how long it'll hold up being attacked from multiple squares. So these are your tier 2 units, right? And these are going to be very important for initial expansion. However, these will, while they all have very good defense, right, very good protection and defense, that's another thing I didn't hit on. If we look at the stats, they have 13 defense, slightly above average attack, slightly above average strength. So they're very solid. But these will fall off in the mid-game as you start to have banishment spam come out. And they will die very, very quickly to large armies of priests or mages. So you can't rely on them, though they are an extremely important part of your army, especially early game and early mid-game. Now we get on to the sacred units. First, we're going to start with the knights. These are your free spawn, and these will only spawn on forts, so you won't get any on non-fort provinces, and they spawn more often if you have a temple in your fort. So templed forts are very good for you. All of your units are going to spawn in proportion to the dominion score in that province. So your crappy tier 1 units, you're going to get more of those if you have more dominion in a province. And your tier 2 units, you're going to get more of those if you have more dominion in your fort provinces. And then your knights, you're going to get more of these if you have more dominion in a fort province with a temple. Though you will also get some of these in fort provinces with no temples, but just fewer. So this is the most important part about them. They're sacred. They're a free spawn sacred. There's very, very few no upkeep free spawn sacreds in the game. Marverni has some with the boars. I think there's a couple more, but there's really not many. There's only a couple. I can think of Marverni in this, and there might be one or two more. So they're extremely good. And when you get a critical mass of temples, you can be getting dozens of these a turn. Though that will really be in the late game. So if we look at their stats, they've got 6 hit points, which is bad. This is by far and away their weakest attribute. They've got 17 protection, which is awesome. They've got 14 magic resistance, which is good. They're unbreakable with morale, which is huge. Their attack strength is 13, which is great. Their strength is 11, which is okay. Their defense skill is 16, which is awesome. This is really high defense, and it's especially good on cavalry because cavalry's defense degrades slower as they get grouped up on. They also have a good shield. It's not as good as the tower shield, but it's pretty darn good. And then they have, very importantly, 3 attacks. So one of them is a lance charge for the first attack, right? And then they have a hoof and a broadsword. So these are extremely awesome, right? There's one other attribute I haven't talked about. These are mindless. So all your units that I've talked about so far, all of your tier 1s and tier 2s are mindless, except for your ghouls. And that's why your ghouls are good at holding up forts. All of your mindless units, they're not very good at defending forts. So these guys are mindless. The other important thing about mindless is if you have somebody doing Soul Slay, Mind Blast, Spam, or anything like that, they will ignore these units and instead they will target your commanders, which are not mindless in general. So that's a very good counter to Ermor. Next we're going to talk about lictors. These guys are awesome. You can get these through summoning, and I'll show you the spell. But their hit point's 20, so now you see they have high hit points. They have great protection, though it's biased to their body, so they're a little vulnerable to archer fire. They don't have pierce resistance, so if your opponent's relying heavily on lictors, you could try archers, though other things in the Ermor army are not affected by archers at all. They have slightly higher magic resistance. Their stats aren't as good. 12 attack, 10 defense. So in some ways they're inferior to the to your knights. But your knights have kind of lowish attack with 17, right? These guys have walloping attacks with 25, so they're very good against high armored units and giants. They also have a chill aura, right? And that's pretty important for pretender design. Because this is obviously better in cold scales. And they're size 2, which means you can pack a lot of them in a square. Your knights, however, they are size 3, as most cavalry is, so you can only put 2 in a square. So anyway, the damage outlay per square is pretty comparable to 3 of these guys or 2 of these. But these are really critical. And you can get these really efficiently. You can get these with priests. Level 3 priests can summon lictors, which is awesome. So it kind of turns these guys into a sort of free spawn, though they're not really free. And you can also get them. You get them more quickly if you spend gems on them, summoning them with mages. If you use the forged item, which I forget. I don't have it here. Oh yeah, here it is. The Black Laurel. Right, it's a 10 gem item. I think you have to be construction 2 to forge it. But this will allow you to summon 3 lictors at a time instead of 2. So that's very nice. Now, let's see what else. So that covers lictors. Now we're going to talk about the Wailing Ladies. So I really don't use these. They're super expensive. They're really good, but they're really expensive. They don't have any protection, but they have good defense and they're ethereal, right? They also have Wail, which is an area of effect attack, so that's good. It's linked 6, but it doesn't repel, but it can't be repelled, really, right? And it inflicts a 5 area of effect fear, right? In addition, these guys have a fear aura that's very strong. So these guys cause tons of fear, right? So they're going to rout people like crazy. The problem is they're so expensive. I think even if you do... We'll check it out real quick. Even if you do Great Lamentation, right? It's 14 Wailing Ladies for 66 gems. So you're paying, I think it's like 5 per. Something around that. Yeah, so it's not awesome. Because for that you can get way more lictors, and I would kind of rather have the lictors. That said, and, you know, they're going to die to... When you get in the late game, there's going to be so much mage support. They're going to effectively die the same way everything else will to heavy mage support. And the problem with this is it's a magic resistance negates attack. So, yeah. It's also counterable late game when they're putting up anti-magic and things like that, which they will. So you can really only get these cost-efficiently late game, but by the time they come out late game, they're really a niche use, maybe for countering super combatants or something like that. They would be very good at that with the fear and combined with Wail. But in terms of main armies, they'll get ruined by mages, and they're very expensive. So, I think we've gone through all of your main units. Now we're going to go into your commanders. So you have censors. These are basically lictors that are commanders. They have very poor leadership, so that you're going to have a morale bonus for most of your units. And I didn't mention that. Most of your units have 50 morale. The exceptions are your non-mindless units, which are your lictors. They have 17 morale. And your ghouls, which also have 17 morale. Right, so you put these guys in a squad with the censor, they get a small morale penalty. It's not a huge deal. The 17 morale is pretty high. But anyway, so this is one of your dudes. They're sacred. If you kit them with gear and put a priest behind them to bless them, they can be pretty good. But facing heavy mage support, they'll die kind of the same as everything else. I don't have one here. You also get your typical Mound Kings, which are pretty good leaders. They have better base leadership. Their leadership is 40. So they don't cause a morale penalty to those they lead. But lictors can hold 100. Censors can have 120 undead troops. Meanwhile, Mound Kings can have 80. So these are the better undead commander. And these are free spawn. So these will spawn in provinces you control. They tend to spawn more, I think, in forts. And meanwhile, Mound Kings will spawn more in non-forts. That's my understanding. I'm not totally sure on that. Now, you have 3 priests. You have a Holy One priest, right? These are acolytes, and these are pretty good, actually, for leading in early expansion parties. Especially if you have a good bless. They can bless themselves. They get 28. They have 20 HP. They have pretty good stats. They have a chill aura, right? They're not ethereal, though, you'll notice. You have a Holy Two priest, the bishop. There's some better things you can do with Holy 2. They have slightly better stats all around, but they're really not that good. I probably haven't recruited one of these all game in the game I'm in. Then you have Holy 3. These guys are freaking awesome. They have good stats, slightly better and slightly worse. I think their attack and defense aren't as good. But anyway, very good hit points, good magic resistance, and... we'll go through what they can each reanimate. The Holy One Priest can get ghouls, soulless, and long dead warriors. Ghouls are pretty useful. These two are kind of wastes of time. Your Holy Two Priest, he can do the same thing, but significantly more soulless. And he can get long dead horsemen, which I didn't mention. They're a type of long dead unit that you can get. I don't think I have any. But they're basically like these guys, except not sacred, and they're worse. But anyway, they're nice to have. these guys are where you get a lot of bang for your buck. They can reanimate lictors one at a time. And I'll go through real quick the priest spells they get, because these are pretty critical for your nation. Unholy Command would be good. You can, you basically can enslave an undead, but it's range 5, right? And usually you don't want these guys in close range. And yeah. So really, super niche. I haven't figured out a way to use it, but could potentially be usable. And then you basically have 3 types of spells. You have a protection, right? And this gives 4 magic resistance to whoever you cast it on. You have a blessing, which is going to impart blessing. But if you'll notice, all your blessings can only affect undead. So you have no means of blessing sacred units that are not undead. So if you like run into if you get Amazons that are sacred, you can't bless them. And finally, you have Unholy Power. This gives extra movement speed and attack skill. I think it's 4 attack and then a significant amount of movement speed to whoever you cast it on. It's area of effect 1. So these are the level 1 spells. At level 2, you get a different spell, a range 50 spell that curses, and I think it also does decay on a unit you target, but it has to be sacred. So if you're fighting elite sacreds, this can be a kind of fun way to mess with them, especially if you think you're going to lose the battle. Especially if they're, especially sacred super combatants. This is a very good counter to them. Range 50 is a huge deal. So this is a very specific counter to sacred super combatants. What else do we have? So then there's higher levels of each of these other spells I mentioned. There's a level 2 protection, which is area of effect 5, and this is going to give magic resistance. There's a level 2 blessing, which is an area of effect 10 blessing, which is a pretty big area of effect. At level 3, we have an entire battlefield blessing, so this is one of the main reasons why you want your archbishops. And you also have an entire battlefield-wide protection spell, but there's a catch to this one, which is its magic resistance negates easily. And what that means is it's not going to affect all your units. You have to cast it many times to get a broad coverage over all your units. So what you'll have happening is your archbishops at the end, who are your Holy 3 units, they will be spamming Protection of the Sepulchre. And finally, you have Power of the Sepulchre, which is Holy 4, so really if you prophetize an archbishop, you can cast it. There's a few other ways too. But this will apply Unholy Power, which is the attack and movement speed buff to the entire battlefield, including your non-sacreds, like all of your chaff warriors, which makes their damage output significantly better. So this is a great spell. So that's your priests. In terms of mages, we're almost done with this. So you have 2 mages. You have a death 3 mage, or a death 2. Oops, sorry. Let me actually summon one of these. We have this guy. I empowered him in this game, but normally he's death 2, right? He's ethereal, which is a big deal, and he has a life drain attack. And he has a fear aura. And I think they cost, how much do they cost? Summon Spectator, it's 12 death gems. So for 12 death gems with a little bit of gear, for example, marble armor on them with a shield, they are very, very thuggable for raiding. They're pretty darn good. You don't really make use of the death, but for 12 gems for a fear, ethereal, high defense raider, they're pretty darn good. If you have a good bless, you can put a shroud on them to impart the bless to them. And then finally you have these guys, Dusk Elders. These are good and bad. The weakness these guys have, so they're always death 3. They can potentially be death 4 if they get a death random. Astral 1 and Fire 1. And then they have a random for Fire, Air, Water, Earth, or Death. Or Astral. So, anyway, there's a lot of different combinations of them. They're going to be your sight searchers. They're your ways to break into other paths. You definitely need magic gems, so these guys are super critical for that. However, this Astral is a huge weakness. On one hand, it allows these guys to be awesome, almost super combatants, right? If you're fighting a non-Astral nation, you can cast Astral Shield, potentially Invulnerability, or Soul Vortex. They have great path access for becoming a super combatant, and because they're ethereal with a fear aura, and then especially if you have a good bless and you put a shroud on them, they can become absolute beasts. That said, if that nation has astral access, especially low-cost astral access, they will magic duel these guys in a heartbeat. So you're really limited, you know, and they're really expensive, and death gems are so scarce that you really often, in the game I'm playing, I can almost never bring these in battle. I can't even let them show their face. So they're, on one hand, they're very good. On the other hand, they have a critical weakness with this astral path. So those are all the units you've got. So we've covered that. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to do Pretender Design. And let's just do that super quick. So we're going to pick MA-Ermor. And for Pretender Design, the thing is, all of your Tier 2 units are going to fall off in use in the middle of the mid-game, right? So you have to have good Sacreds, in my opinion, to play MA-Ermor. If you don't have Sacreds, you're going to get absolutely munched. There's potentially other ways to play, but I can't think of a good way. And with the kind of aggression you're going to get from playing MA-Ermor, you really need to have a strong mid and late game. So I think what you basically have to have is a strong bless. One of the particular things you're going to need in your bless is you need a blood. Blood is so key for the bless because all the mages and priests are going to counter your Tier 2 units, and you need your Sacreds to be a counter to that. So the blood bless is pretty freaking important because that will allow your Sacreds to counter a lot of the mage and priest counters to all your other units. When you're getting a blood bless, a lot of times you want to get a nature bless also. Your troops do not have a lot of HP. They have great stats aside from HP, like your knights especially. So getting this will over double the HP of your knights, plus the regeneration will increase the effective HP. This makes such a huge difference, right? While you're at it, you can pick up a Death 9 bless, and this will again double, more than double. I think your knights have 6 HP. So with the death and a nature bless, you're getting 18 more, right? Which is, you're multiplying their HP by 4, right? Plus regeneration, so it's even more than that. The difference between having this bless on your knights and not is just night and day. Absolutely night and day. So these are super critical. This makes a really good bless. And with this, if you went with Mother of Monsters, who's the best chassis to do this particular bless, you can actually end up having pretty high Dominion. You always want to trash your scales as MA-Ermor. I'm going to show you the scales you always trash. This can be hot or cold depending on what you want. It's a little better to pick cold just for the lictors, but there's other reasons, like you have aquatic units, you may want to go heat. You always want to trash growth. These first 4 scales you're always going to trash, and the heat or cold you can do in either direction, but you want to trash all 4 of these. These last 2 you may or may not want. A lot of times I go for Drain because you want the additional magic resistance, and you can do research with Dusk Elders where this research malice isn't quite as bad. However, if you go Misfortune and Drain, you end up having some real problems, and the real problem that you have is you get one of the worst events in the game, and you'll get it once or twice a year, where it will drain a significant amount of your magic gem reserves. You know, up to like 15 of each type. So this is a viable build. This is an Awake Pretender, right? Who's going to have all. So she can probably almost, kind of almost expand at the beginning. You may want to get her something. I haven't actually tested this as an Awake expander. But with Poison Cloud and all, you probably could. Yeah, it would be a little tricky though. So anyway, like this is a very viable build. You can also go Imprisoned, right? If you go Imprisoned, what that's going to allow you to do is flip this one all the way up, right? So now you get Luck 3, which is going to allow you to get all your national heroes, which you'll get none of in the whole game if you go Misfortune. You'll never get a national hero. So if you go Luck 3, you'll get your national hero. And I think that's about it. You can't really do anything else. Yeah, so this would be a build. This is a very strong build. It's got really good late mid-game because you're going to be getting a lot of these luck events. You'll get a lot of money that you can use to put up more forts and more temples to get more units. And you'll have access to this fine lady. Well, this one you won't have access to it with her until year 3. You could also potentially do Dormant where you get her sooner and you just do Luck 1. This would still be very viable. You don't get any of the bad events. And you can't really... She would be tough to expand with in year 1. But, whoops. But what you would do is you would have her available to kit by the end of, what, year 1.5. When's Dormant? Awake in a year's time, right? So at the end of the first year, you might be able to forge her some items or something like that. Or she can come in early and help you research. So anyway, that was a viable build. And finally, this is the build I went with, which is a very cancerous build. Though I'm not sure if it's actually stronger than that build I just showed you with Mother of Monsters, but it turns your sacreds into absolute beasts. So you take that same Death, Nature, Blood Bless, which is really the core, and you add to it the Water Bless. And there's a ton of synergy there. The synergy is that with the water you get 4 defense, so it's going to turn your knights into almost 20 defense sacreds, right, that are very hard to hit, that are going to have tons of HP, and that are going to regenerate. So it makes the defense, it makes your knights so much stronger on defense, right? It really synergizes with the Death and the Nature Bless. And finally you get Quickness, which is going to dramatically increase the damage outlay of all your sacreds, like increasing it by 50%, which is absolutely huge. And the movement speed is awesome as well, because a lot of times you want to close that gap between you and the enemy army very quickly. And what's additionally valuable about Quickness is one of the downsides of Quickness is it will increase the fatigue and the fatigue that you build up on your units. So a lot of times when you take a water, you want to mine or earth or something to counterbalance the fatigue you're going to get on your sacreds. Well, with undead units, you don't have to worry about it. They don't get any fatigue. So the water is an extremely awesome pickup. You could also get fire, but I think water's just way better. And then you can go slaw. We're going to trash our scales. We're going to trash this. This is what you have to do. You have to take all negative scales to pay for it. And then you can have 6 Dominion. So this is the build I went with. And yeah, in the next episode you'll get to see early expansion. And if you watch all the way through, you'll get to see how the game ends, which I don't know how that is. But thanks everyone for watching, and look forward to doing the Let's Play with you.